Now, how do we use participles? Just as we use other adjectives. If we wanted to talk about a man who's walking, we could describe him as a walking man. Do you see that in terms of the words and the form, this is essentially the same as talking about a good man? That is to say, this is an adjective and this is an adjective. How do we say a good man in Hebrew? We say man good, right? Ish tov. How do we say the good man in Hebrew? We say the man, the good. Ha-ish, ha-tov. How do we say the walking man in Hebrew? We say the man, ha-ish, what's walking? Halak, except that now that verb form, halak, is going to appear as a participle, which means the form is going to be holek. But the article still agrees with the noun with which it's attached. The man, the walking one. Get it? By the way, let me do this an aside. This could also be translated as a relative clause. Do you see that? The walking man is really talking about the man who is right now walking. Do you see that? And it's quite legitimate to make these into a relative clause, remembering that this entire construction, well, is this a sentence or isn't it? Do attributive adjectives make sentences? No. The good man. No. Is this a sentence? The man who is walking. No. You have a dependent clause that has a subject and a predicate, but it's part of the subject of a sentence, and you still haven't said what the man who is walking is doing. See what I'm saying? So this is still under the category attributive. However, just as with adjectives, we can also do a predicate adjective. We can say a man is walking. A man is walking. How would we say that in Hebrew?
Walking.
All right. Man walking, or walking man. Right? How about the man is walking? Ha-ish holek. Now what have I done here? You may notice that, and here is one minor difference. That's not a minor difference. One difference with the participle. When you have a predicate participle, yes, the predicate participles, like attribute, I'm going ahead of myself. Like predicate adjectives, predicate participles have to agree. Predicate adjectives will not show the definite article, but predicate participles, when we have talking about a participle, they usually follow the noun. Which gives you a sentence that is very similar to Hebrew word order. The man is walking. Get it? I want to observe that we're having a technical difficulty with this camera, which is why you seem far away. But what I'd like to do is review a little bit of the irregular forms that you looked at briefly yesterday. We're talking about the participle. Is this making sense? I don't mean to belabor the obvious. If you look in the book on page, and you went over this yesterday with Dr. Adams, on page 107, you realize that there are a few what I would call minor oddities with the forms of the participles. Now remember yesterday when we first introduced this, I said that the single most distinctive characteristic of the participle was that holum, because in all the forms you have the holum. The basic form is that co-tail form, the plural co-teleme, co-telleth, which is this sort of odd form over here in the feminine, and then co-teloth, but they all have that O. And that is consistent even when you have some what I would call minor oddities. For example, the first gutturals in the feminine form, instead of being co-telleth, what you get instead, if you have a guttural letter hanging around really the second or third position, you see that we have in bakar, we have a guttural letter, then you'll get it as bokareth. This is simply an example of the little principle we've learned since course began, that guttural letters prefer A vowels. All right? But you still have the holum there. Right? You still have the holum there. And there are a few other oddities that you will see from time to time in the forms of the participles, but by and large you can figure them out. There are, however, two patterns that are worthy of note because they are even more irregular. And did you actually go over the forms yesterday? Just to review then, the first is, at least in the order of the book, third hay. And the reason we're doing third hay first here, where in other chapters it's been second, is because the third hays, even though they do some odd things, they still have hanging around really the second or third position. You see that we have in bakar, we have a guttural letter, then you'll get it as bokareth. This is simply an example of the little principle we've learned since course began, that guttural letters prefer A vowels. All right? But you still have the holum there. Right? You still have the holum there. And there are a few other oddities that you will see from time to time in the forms of the participles, but by and large you can figure them out. There are, however,